So let me know if it's too loud. Um, First of all, I want to say thank you to David. He gave, we do a lot of work on semiconductors, and he's already covered a lot of things I was going to say. So we've been very active, and we've got great leadership on that issue. So and we enjoy working with you and Mike, and it's been a great relationship for years. In fact, our Undersecretary Gil Kaplan often refers to SEMI when we start talking about solutions for other things. So I just wanted to point that out. So my congratulations to Sridhar and MForesight and the team for bringing us all together today for what's the fourth summit. And I've enjoyed attending these in the past and found them very informative and very helpful in our efforts to advance the competitiveness of the U.S. manufacturing sector. Our Undersecretary for International Trade, oh, sorry, thanks. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. Is Gil Kaplan, and he's on official travel in Mozambique this week, and speaking at a conference there. So he asked me to come and speak with you today. But let me, I first want to share that with you his interest and commitment to promoting U.S. manufacturing. And he understands the importance of manufacturing to the economy, and has spent a great deal over the course of his career supporting U.S. manufacturers. I actually met him several years ago when he was standing up the Manufacturing Policy Initiative at Indiana University, which Keith runs back there, and he talks about that a great deal with me, and he's been very proud of his work and the work that you're doing there to placing and developing policies to revitalize manufacturing. This very topic of why we're all here. So, and given the focus of today's conference, I thought it'd be important to give you some background on the Commerce Department and the role we play to help manufacturers. Commerce is made up of a number of agencies that at first glance may seem like a bit of an organizational mashup or a holding company, but if you step back and take a look at them, you'll see that they all fit together to support U.S. competitiveness. We have the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Bureau of Industry and Security, the Census Bureau, Economic Development Administration, International Trade Administration, the Minority Business Development Agency, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So you can see just within our building, to get us all on the same page, takes a lot of meetings, takes a lot of work sometimes. So, but we all do work together. And I'll focus my remarks on the International Trade Administration, which is where I've worked. It sounds like you've covered a lot of topics today, but I'll share this with you. And there are a number of folks out there, like Sharish, that we've worked closely together through the years. We're good conveners, just like with the semiconductor roundtable that you guys participated in the other day at the Select USA Summit. So we use our industry knowledge to develop opportunities like that and create openings in markets to help U.S. companies export. So the International Trade Administration is the U.S. government's leading advocate for advancing the competitive position of U.S. industry in the global marketplace. And we are made up of 3 business units. There's the global markets, which they help companies export goods and services and resolve market barriers and promote foreign trade investment in the United States, which is part of what the Select USA Summit was about the other day, getting companies to invest here and manufacture here in the U.S. They also they do advocacy work to help U.S. companies that are seeking contracts and tenders abroad and brought forth by foreign governments. They represent the interests of U.S. exporters through, we have a strong global and domestic network of trade professionals in more than 70 countries and 100 U.S. locations. So we probably have someone in our field staff, if not in your town, very close to your town, and we'd be glad to make that connection for you as well. And then we have the Industry Analysis Unit, which is our industry sector specialists, which provide expertise in international trade policy, investment, export promotion, and they represent the interests of U.S. industry in trade negotiations. They're they're the industry sector nerds, as we like to say back at the shop. They publish industry-specific international research and analysis for use by American businesses as well as government policymakers. So we do a lot of reports and answer a lot of questions. It could be smart grid, it could be pharmaceuticals, it could be food packaging machinery, and a lot of times it's semiconductors, 5G, telecom. So we work on a lot of those issues. And so our guys are the ones that are knowledgeable about the industry and usually are in the, get the call to brief the secretary or the undersecretary when it comes to these topics. So, and then we have an enforcement and compliance unit, which works to maintain the open markets and promote investment and business activity. They provide U.S. businesses and workers with the opportunity to compete on a level playing field, both in the United States. So they do they investigate allegations of unfair dumping and subsidies and impose border measures to offset such market distorting conduct. They also facilitate trade and promote U.S. business investment and commercial activity in more than 1,000 federally designated free trade zones. So they're the folks that you would go through to apply for a free trade zone in your area. And they also monitor and ensure compliance with more than 250 industrial trade agreements negotiated on behalf of the United States. So I specifically serve in the industry and analysis unit where I'm the senior advisor for manufacturing. So I kind of oversee all the industry sectors and the work that goes on within our offices. We have trade specialists that have in-depth knowledge on specific industries across the transportation, energy, health, ICT, and materials and textile sectors. And we also have staff looking at supply chains and advanced manufacturing and emerging technologies to see how we can help position U.S. firms to continue to lead in these areas. Technology is a big part of what we do, and technology is changing the nature of manufacturing. The Internet of Things, 5G, cloud computing, and big data analytics are converging to bring massive gains to the traditional manufacturing plan, leading to improvements in design and development cycles. According to a recent survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers on digitization, companies are expected to see $493 billion increase in annual revenues by 2020 and savings of $421 billion over the same period. So this is going to be exciting stuff. I think we're heading into a really unique time in manufacturing. And 2 years ago, the U.S. Society of Manufacturing Engineers found that over half of manufacturing leaders plan to invest in advanced manufacturing technologies over the coming years. So we are focused on the future and looking at possible issues and trade barriers to trade issues facing U.S. industries as they continue to utilize technology to innovate and build their businesses. So David already gave a great presentation and touched on a number of these issues. The Internet of Things, we see that as transforming the systems and the way factories operate within machine-to-machine communication and the ability to quickly analyze and interpret big data. We have some really wonderful, smart staff working on smart grid and all the solutions and things surrounding that. And it's often now we have the issue of trying to figure out who needs to be in the meeting when you talk about an industry. If you're talking about the auto industry, you need your battery folks, you need your sensor folks. So it's we're working through those issues just inside our organization. But it's exciting, and we welcome the challenge. So speaking of sensors, the cost of them decreased dramatically over the last decade, and they're the foundation of Internet of Things and being embedded throughout the manufacturing value chain, from manufacturing machinery to conveyors to pellets to carry finished goods. Sensors don't simply count the amount of bottles on the conveyor these days, but they can tell you what the color of the bottle is, what liquid's inside, and whether it's defective. The sensors take all kinds of data from the physical world and translate it into a language that we can interact with to increase efficiency and safety and even decrease waste. I should also point out that while these are not universal solutions to every manufacturing problem, we should also think of additive manufacturing and robotics as tools that are enhancing the manufacturing process, and that's where we are today. So we're we're spending a lot of time looking at the processes and figuring out, working with industry as they look to expand into other markets and the security of it, which I'll touch on in a minute. So manufacturing in the United States does not come without its challenges as it moves from more conventional factories to advanced ones. Industry faces new dynamics in its workforce, as David mentioned, and which is likely to continue to produce skills gaps, and cybersecurity is an increasing concern as machines become interconnected, and small businesses in the advanced manufacturing space also face barriers just due to their size. So on the workforce, we all agree that it's changing. They'll need to gain new skills to keep pace. The Secretary Ross, and Undersecretary Kaplan are both very engaged in this issue and serve on committees at the White House and within the interagency to address this problem and try to figure out the best way forward. And I think that a lot of solutions are coming from out there in the states and out there in local government, state governments, and universities as well, academia, coming up with their own ways to address this. To address these rising workforce challenges, we also think that the American private sector and the U.S. government will need to work together a little more closely. U.S. businesses are going to need to provide the necessary training to build the skills employees are going to need to be successful, and the government will need to place additional emphasis into promoting innovation and to help with the build the workforce as well. It's going to take some time, and we think that factory floor jobs are going to look are going to look a lot different, and we're trying to figure out with our friends at NIST and other parts across the government how this is going to shape up. So we are paying attention to it. It's not my top priority in the International Trade Administration, but because of our knowledge in these areas, we do get involved, and it is a high priority for Undersecretary Kaplan. So we support him in those efforts. So with the exciting opportunities technology is providing in the manufacturing sector, we also see some concerning trends in the digital space emerging in markets overseas. While it's clear that economic and trade policy can foster innovation and promote growth, it also has the potential to seriously constrain those things. Concerns over privacy, cybersecurity, law enforcement access, and the strength of domestic industry have led to policies that threaten to balkanize the internet, stifle innovation, and make it harder for companies to do business. Some countries are taking steps to fragment the internet along national borders, requiring the use of local servers and mandate the inclusion of local content or domestic intellectual property through the various standards and regulations. And aside from that, standards play an important role in supporting the ICT sector and the digital economy more broadly, especially for emerging technologies. However, some countries are developing unique national standards for these technologies instead of embracing international relevant standards, again, threatening innovation and increasing costs for U.S. businesses. And all these policies could have major consequences across sectors looking to digitize, including manufacturing. We at ITA are working hard to address these challenges through dialogues with governments around the world. We have dialogue. We have a strong dialogue with the government of Brazil, where we address a lot of these issues. We just had meetings with the Koreans on these, so we do a lot of bilateral work to raise these issues and see what we can do to resolve them to help them on behalf of the industry. We will, as we move forward in manufacturing, we will need to focus on where and how key innovators in industry can provide the necessary resources toward progressing manufacturing, from utilizing our many IT innovators in Silicon Valley to tapping the expertise to be found in the manufacturing U.S. institutes and companies and academic labs and programs around the country. There's an entire range of stakeholders and resources that we will need to collaborate with to make this happen. And I spoke about that a little bit earlier. We've been doing it more sector by sector, but I think it's slowly shifting into we need a bigger room. And I know many of you in the room are leaders in helping bring about this change, because I've been working at this for a while, and I recognize a number of you, and know that you spend a lot of your time, spare time, not necessarily take time out of your day jobs to help us help you and help U.S. manufacturing. I mean, I see it, and we have advisory committees that you participated in, panels that you'll come to town and speak to our staff about, and just help us collaborate to come up with solutions. And I think that's a big part that makes us effective within the U.S. government, or at least our unit in the industry and analysis unit, our group of industry specialists. So I think that the United States we're helping pioneer the advanced manufacturing space. I mean, there are other countries that are strong competitors, that are doing making big advancements and really have focused plans, as all of you were talking about a few minutes ago. Not to mention any country specifically, but to continue to be successful, we're going to have to create and maintain a culture that enables this kind of customized innovation, where concepts are brought down to the ground and put into practice. And I think that we have the staff now. The folks we've hired, a lot of bright young folks that are very committed to this cause and make it happen. And it's reinvigorating to me, having worked in this for quite a while, to be able to hire such sharp and eager staff to help address these issues. So in the end, I wanted to point out that the United States is a country that makes things, and we've always been a country that makes things, and will continue to be moving forward. So what's important at this juncture is to ensure that we work together to offer innovative solutions to help U.S. manufacturers better navigate the next steps to be taken as our technologies advance and our factories become automated to the next level. So I'd like to thank Sridhar and Tom Mahoney and Mike Rousseau for having Commerce participate in this great event, and for your tireless effort and commitment to ensuring the U.S. remains a leader in manufacturing. Thank you all for being here today, because this is where I learn, and hopefully you guys learn as well. And we gain a lot from these. So I know there are a lot of work to put on. So
round of applause for Bart. Stay right there, Bart. We're all experts. We're all learners. So we're going to now have Bart play more of the teacher role. Going to ask questions. I'm going to jump in with the first one. And David is also fair game for questions after his great presentation. Bart, at one point you said it's something that's not my top priority.
Yeah.
Everybody in this room has that list of 29 things we mean to do today, but we've got the bandwidth to do about 5. What is your top priority? What is it that I got to get this done?
Well, I will tell you, let me shift it a little bit to Undersecretary Kaplan's priorities. And one thing I noticed is that they actually, I've not had a chance to read MForesight's new document, but when I was looking at it, the thing that really struck me is that I think he has actually 8 on his list. It seems to keep growing, but what the report was about focused on diverse aspects of the manufacturing ecosystem, workforce development, engineering talent, translational research, capital mobilization is important. Ex-Im Bank, and we're hoping that will be fully, people will be confirmed, and that will be up and running and into the future beyond September when it expires, and focuses on supply chain. So when I said that it's not necessarily my personal priority, it's one that we get drawn and work onto. It is definitely workforce development. It's definitely one of his and the secretaries. But our friends at NIST have been very engaged in supporting the workforce development work going on in the department.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit, just because I'm getting everybody. So personally, safe space, we all know the law of thermodynamics. Energy and motion is going to stay in motion. We all know where the trend's been going, with some great exceptions, some folks in this room. What do you think it's going to take to kind of reverse that trend and get our mojo back?
I think there are a number of factors, and I think that on manufacturing, I think there's been a lot of work to shift the paradigm and just the how people view manufacturing, how young folks view manufacturing. There's manufacturing day, and there's and a lot of you open up your firms and plants and go out and recruit. I mean, I think that what I see, I have a college-age son, and I see a lot of these kids going into engineering. I mean, I actually think the workforce is going to be there. I mean, I talk to my colleagues at work, and their sons and daughters that come out of engineering are working for U.S. companies across the country. So I mean, I feel like we're heading in the right direction there. I think we always want that to move a little faster. So I think that is actually taking place, and I think that some of the lower skilled jobs may be a little bit harder to fill, but I think that there are states with strong community colleges systems. I'm from North Carolina, and we actually have a very good community college system there, and I've seen where industry has worked directly with them to produce great.
That's a good point. As I open it up for questions, raise your hand if you have a thought. There are 3,376 colleges in the United States. I know I spoke at 200 of them after I graduated when I was doing nonprofit stuff, and more than half of the students in the country are community college students. So there's just a huge group that doesn't get the same respect that it often should. Questions or thoughts for Bart or David? Anybody got something they want to raise, say, share? Hiram?
Bart, I don't know if you could comment on this, but
Hold up, Hiram. Just stand up if you don't mind.
I don't know if you can. Okay, so I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can comment on this or not, but oftentimes we talk about these kind of issues, but we leave capital markets out of the question. But if you really look at sort of what's happened over the last 30 years, capital markets have played a big role in where manufacturing has gone, for better or for worse, and generally for both. Does Commerce talk to Treasury about, I mean, what role does capital markets play in sort of these kind of policies, or where you would see policy coming forward in terms of addressing these kind of challenges?
Well, I know that Secretary Ross and Secretary Mnuchin talk often. I mean, very regularly. So I think that they're at a very senior level. They're talking about these issues. They're addressing these issues. I would say that we see looking at it from a national perspective, and where and you look at almost, I tend to think more of like the subsidization that goes around the world, and answer in that aspect. And so we are watching that very closely to see, and the administration is looking to see if there are unfair subsidies taking place, and Undersecretary Kaplan's worked on that for years.
How about closer to home? So when I think of the fact that publicly listed companies have decreased by 50% over the last 25, 30 years, private equity has a much bigger piece of the economy now. Are those things that get any kind of traction at Commerce and Treasury, or is that just stuff that is just going to continue?
On the small and medium-sized enterprise side of that, I think that SBA has revamped some of their programs to focus funds into that to help companies get started, and I think that that dates back to the last administration. I'm sure they've probably been revamped a good bit. We do have an Office of Financial Industry and Financial Services outside of my group that focuses on that, and they. But most of our work is usually done with XM and secretaries on the board of XM and OPIC, and so our focus is, we look at it from that area. But we do see investment. We do see a lot of companies that are looking for investment, but I have to admit the smaller ones that are coming to see us, or trying to a lot of them have a SBIR funding, and they're trying to figure out the next steps. So that's more of where my day-to-day work in that would be.
And as we pass the mic over, a lot of our small businesses, by the way, they're not on the East or West Coast. They don't know how to get to Washington. They don't know have access. They're just good people trying to build companies in the middle of nowhere. So how do we best help them? But first.
Ken Jarbo, my question is for David based on a remark that Bart made. Bart, I'm going to let you off the hook here because the question's on cybersecurity, and I know NIST takes the lead in that area. But my question is back to David. What are you doing at SEMI on the cybersecurity issue, and specifically not so much the data breach issue, but the malware and what I call cyber sabotage? As you know, MForesight did a report on that, 2 years ago? But I don't see a lot of uptake from the industry beyond the standard rhetoric on, well, we protect privacy. I'm concerned about privacy. I'm more concerned about hacking into machinery and causing robots to run amok and, breaking down the semiconductor, all of a sudden creating non-usable chips because somebody hacked into one of your machines. So what are you doing on that area?
We currently have just initiated last year a standards committee on traceability and security across the supply chain. So putting standards in place for devices so that they're traceable all the way back to the beginnings of the materials and incoming materials that they're created with. So it's a traceability as well as security standards on data protocol. So in the tool interface that we've historically built over time, making sure that we have the appropriate standards built into the tool interface for data packet transfer protocols on that. We have a program going on looking at secure data transfer using homomorphic encryption along with blockchain to transfer data so that the encrypted data never gets unencrypted. The algorithms can work on the encrypted data so that the producer, the owner of the data, is the only one who can understand what's been done and what the results are. So we have several areas in standards as well as practical implementation to ensure that.
So is everybody okay with Ken's nomination that David is now in charge of stopping all hacking everywhere in all industries?
My other, just a quick follow-up on that, David. What about malware as opposed to data security? Going back to the famous hack of the cargo company, the Danish cargo company, one of the things that caused the problem was not so much that they shut down their machines, but because they didn't have access to the data, trucks couldn't literally not get into the ports. Ships had no idea where their cargo was, so they literally shut everything down by simply taking out one component of the network. So are you dealing with malware as well?
Well, yeah, I think after what came out with AMD and Intel a year or so ago, of having designers building in backdoors so that they could go back in and test the device that ultimately become open doors to the bad guys. So there's a focus on that. And of course, on the traceability standards, we're looking for anything that might build a Trojan horse or a backdoor into a device that can be determined along the lines of the process, as well as the industry's participating in a lot of the aspects around trusted supply.
Which, by the way, has in every science fiction movie ever done has happened. I'm not the only science fiction fan in the room, I know. So if they are building those doors, how do we stop them or how do we catch them? Got time for a couple more questions, and I'll ask for any logistics before we break for lunch. Can you grab the mic, Ken? Ken, can you pass the mic on over here?
Jim Davis from the Smart Manufacturing Institute in UCLA. Since we're talking about cybersecurity, I thought I would just put an observation out there. Over the past few weeks, in short succession, I've been at a CIO meeting, a manufacturing meeting, a university meeting, and a government meeting. And I would say the conversations on cybersecurity in those 4 meetings are entirely different. They are not connected. They are not talking about the same things. And it's a key place where there's some conversations that need to come together.
When you first said that, Jim, I thought there was a joke in there somewhere. A UCLA guy walked into a government meeting, a funders meeting. But the joke's on us if we can't figure out ways, and that's the pattern for all of us. We've got to work better together, not just coordinate, let each other know, but build things better together. Scott.
Yeah, it just seems that over the last few decades, China's definitely had a strategy to bring manufacturing to their country. And it's, for the trade deficit, you could see it worked. So, and I know there's a lot of programs to focus on exports in our country. Are there any specific programs to focus on reshoring? Because it's a lot easier to reshore than it is to export. But it seems like we have nothing at all that focuses on reshoring.
So thank you for raising that. Undersecretary Kaplan has renamed one of our programs, Select USA. He likes to refer to it as Reselect USA. So since he arrived, and there are folks like Harry Mosier and other folks that are working closely on this, and we talk to them very, very regularly. And one of the offices, one of the units that was a big this summit that we had last week, this Select USA Summit, where we had the semiconductor roundtable and talked about people manufacturing here in the U.S. and that was one of the events, but there were many of them surrounding this, and I think there were over 3,000 people attending this conference. And but he has had a big focus on that he refers to as Reselect USA. So it's reshoring just as well as bringing new manufacturers new to the U.S. over. So so he actually had a statistic on that the other day, which I don't have with me, but I mean I can follow it. But it's a main goal from him, and he talked about it since he walked in the building. And Richard McCormick, who's I don't know if Richard's here yet, but who should be here this afternoon. He's a big fan and very committed to that too. So he may know some more of the specifics of what they're doing. But now it's yeah. So we've had a hard time in the government shifting it to calling Reselect USA as opposed to Select USA. So that it's and thank you for highlighting that. But it's we're constantly doing that, and I think he's talked to some state level EDAs about that as well, about what can we do.
Sridhar.
Dave, I have a question for you. First of all, your presentation, it's a very nice global view of semi industry. I have a question and a comment, both based on very limited knowledge. When you show the exports and imports, you have materials and equipment we are exporting. There's a big bar, and the little one we are importing. Here it is. If you're exporting materials and importing finished goods, that's probably what the underdeveloped countries do. Number two, what fraction of that export market is materials versus equipment? And if we are exporting equipment also, is there any way we could manufacture it here? And then the follow-up question is actually, this is something we learned from Willie Shee, the systems in package. He talks about how the semiconductor packaging went to Hong Kong and Macau back in the 60s because it's sort of labor intensive. Now it's fully automated. There is no reason why we can bring it back, and your thoughts on that, because you can build industrial commons around this packaging.
So I guess there's a couple of parts to the question. Is the percentage of materials versus equipment? It's 50% materials and 40% equipment. To the point of the equipment, could it be made here? It is made here. That equipment is made in the U.S. and exported to manufacturers overseas. An interesting nuance to that is 30 years ago, the U.S. and the industry made an investment, Semitech. So it was probably one of the most successful public-private partnerships on record. The U.S. government invested some $750 million over the course of 8 or 9 years. The focus of Semitech was developing a domestic equipment manufacturing infrastructure and a domestic materials supply base for the semiconductor industry. Here we are some 30 years later, and we still own that area of the market because we developed it and invested in it and maintained it in the U.S. So I think it's a really good example of what can be done from a strategic investment standpoint.
Let's close with a thought before we go to lunch.